Chairman, just on my connection, it seems today that we have a countdown saying that it's live in 4 minutes, 17, 16, 15. So I'm just going to, okay, we are now live.
We're now live. So we're okay to start. Thank you, Ben. Welcome everybody to the Northants Shadow Executive Committee of the 4th of March. Have we got any apologies for absence, please, Ben?
Yes, Chair, if I could. Councillor Jean Addison sends her apologies. She's feeling slightly under the weather, so she's not going to join us.
Sorry to hear that. Please send our regards.
Thank you.
You're muted, Ben.
Apologies. We also have apologies from Councillor Tom Partridge Underwood.
No others, thank you. I've had no requests to address the meeting. Members' declarations of interest, are there any?
Okay.
Right. The minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of February 2021 are set out on pages 5 to 16 of the agenda pack. Are there any other comments in respect of their accuracy? Therefore, could I have a mover and a seconder, please? I've got Wendy moving. Could I have a seconder? Tom Beattie. Could I have a show of hands, please? Those four.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. We now come to item 5, Transformation Task and Finish Group update. I'd like to invite the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Task and Finish Group, Councillor Helen Harrison, who's going to introduce this report. Helen, over to you, and you're more than welcome.
Thank you, Leader, and good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening to present this report. As you know, the Task and Finish Group, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee set up a separate Task and Finish Group to look at the blueprint in a little bit more detail in order to give us the assurance that it was complete and ready in order for our day one services to get going. We had 4 meetings, and in the first meeting we agreed our terms of reference and decided how we were going to look at the blueprint. Now, as you'll all appreciate, it's a very large document and covers absolutely every aspect of our new council, its workings, the IT, absolutely everything. And it was very clear that there's no way in the 3 meetings that we had, we were going to be able to look at every single part of that blueprint. So we decided to focus in each meeting on a different area. And those areas were housing standards, waste collection and disposal, and public health and well-being, and how that would integrate across all areas of the council. Now, when I delivered this report to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, as you can probably imagine, with 3 meetings, with a lot of detail coming out of all 3 of those meetings, I pretty much gabbled my way through the report. So I've tried to cut it down a little bit today, because you've got the report in front of you with what is already quite a shortened form of what was discussed, but I'll try to shorten it a little bit more so I don't take up too much of your time this evening. I'd like, obviously, some of the things I'm going to say, probably a lot of the things that I'm going to say that we brought up will actually be quite familiar to you. I'm sure that you will have picked up a lot of this as you've been going through your meetings. But I hope that it's possible that we might raise something that hasn't been thought about, hasn't been considered, and just raises your awareness of that particular issue. An awful lot of it is things that we are going to be continuing to look at once the council goes live on the 1st of April. There was nothing that we picked up that was sort of a massive clangor that we thought, oh my goodness, if this isn't sorted, something's going to go wrong. And I would like to say that we were very assured that, you know, our deep dives into those 3 separate areas really showed that, you know, everything was in place. The aggregation and disaggregation seemed to be pretty complete, and the officers that provided reports for us were from the different councils, and it felt to me as if there was already an awful lot of working across the board, and that these teams were already beginning to work together, and I felt that it was quite clear that this was already beginning to move from the existing sovereign councils, and the working was beginning to already happen in that more cohesive fashion, ready for the new council. So I would like to just congratulate all of you and all the officers who've worked so hard in bringing the blueprint together. It stood the scrutiny, and looks like, you know, with all the work that you're still doing over the next month or so, it is going to stand up, and our council is going to get running on the 1st with great success. So I will try to just give you a little bit of an overview of some of the things that we picked out from those 3 areas that we felt were quite important. So the first area that we looked at was housing standards, and we thought, and as again, bear with me, because some of this you'll be thinking, well, yes, of course, obviously, but I will say the obvious things as well as the less obvious, if you'll bear with me. We felt it was incredibly important when it came to housing standards and delivering for our residents. It's absolutely vital that the housing services were integrated across other areas of the council. So, for example, public health, adult social services, and many other areas, because in bringing all of those things together, we're likely to be able to provide a very high standard of service, and that was absolutely vital. We did note that in the blueprint, the sort of ambition was to deliver at least as good a service as is now, and we hoped obviously that would the ambition would very quickly be expanded and extended to improve the standards in our housing that we provide for the people in our locality. We were very keen to see the council looking outwards, looking to other councils, looking to best practice. We were aware of some very good examples of social housing provision in different council areas, in particular in terms of design, but also energy efficiency and making sure that what we're providing is going to stand the test of time. And then I think the other thing that was really brought home to us was how important it was going to be to look at disabled facilities grants. There's a huge demand for them, and quite a backlog in dealing with those. And of course, they do, when delivered well and delivered efficiently, they do provide. They do help us with our overall ambition of keeping people safe and well and independent at home. And we thought that was something that it's tricky because, you know, the money's not necessarily there to provide everybody with exactly what they want and need. But I think that's an area that's going to need a great deal of time and effort to make sure it runs as smoothly and efficiently as possible, because I think every pound spent there saves probably 7 or 8, maybe, you know, more pounds further down the line. There's more in the report, but they were the things I wanted to draw out for you when it came to housing standards. In terms of waste collection and disposal, it was clear that an awful lot of the aggregation and disaggregation was complete, but there were some areas that still required harmonisation. So, for example, decisions on charges for green waste, I think that is still outstanding. And there was another one which I've just briefly forgotten, something else. I think it might have been to do with the Wellingborough Waste Collection Service. And of course, that's coming up for renewal in 2022. So that was pretty urgent. I think another thing that was really brought home to us as very important, but not just important, probably a real opportunity for us as a new council, quite possibly working with West Northants, was waste disposal infrastructure, because we really struggle for that in this area. We don't have enough of it, and we now have that opportunity to think really strategically and really plan it into what we're going to do and how we're going to deliver waste disposal in our area. And I think that could be a real opportunity, because if we can do it well, I suspect it may be that we can sell those services a bit further abroad. So that was something that was very important. Again, I'm sure this is like teaching. This is just pretty obvious, really. But with the changeover of the waste collection, quite rightly, in my view, bins were only going to be replaced as they wore out. So across the whole of Northamptonshire, there's going to be different coloured bins being collected on the same days and so on. And we just wanted to point out that very, very clear communication with the public was going to be needed, so that when on the website it says it's Green Bin Day, I don't know what other colour people have, but if it was a different colour, make sure people know what day it is. Then so I think that was they were the most sort of the biggest things. I think the infrastructure one being the biggest sort of gritty issues, or and opportunities looking ahead. Regarding public health, it was again thought very, very important that health and well-being was something that needed to be absolutely embedded into everything that we do. So not as an afterthought, but something that's built into all our strategy and policy right from the word go. After all, that's what most council services are based on. And when we talked to so Lucy Whiteman, for example, about this, and I was sort of talking to her about how we might be able to, make sure that that working together was sort of as good as possible and as seamless as possible. She pointed out that that's not, they wouldn't be, public health team's quite a small team, and they're covering both the two new council areas. It wouldn't be particularly possible for them to be involved in every decision and comment on everything. So it was something that we were going to have to create as a culture that was just there within what we do, rather than sort of some sort of official process that involved the public health team every single time. So it was very much about building a culture that we thought was going to be really important to make sure that the services that we're delivering are really going to help to improve and boost the health and well-being of all of our residents. This might be something that is already completely planned in, and we weren't quite sure, but the adult community hubs, which are already looking to be an absolutely great success in terms of the transformation of services in our area, we felt that if public health and well-being activities could be incorporated into those health hubs, so those community hubs, so that we're meshing services together. Professionals are able to easily communicate with each other and make sure we're bringing services as close to the people as possible that we serve. That would be a very important thing that we can do. We also felt that in terms of public health, the formal public health strategies and things that we have to deliver, it was very, very important that the data that we were using should be as locally gathered as possible and as up to date as possible. An awful lot of data we use is sort of, lags and is quite old. But, as I'm sure you can appreciate, looking at teenage pregnancy strategies in a sort of an area that's full of retired people is probably not a very good way of doing things. And I know we don't, but the more that we can target what we're doing, the better that's going to be financially, but also in producing the results that we want. We wanted to look at reducing barriers to health facilities, and so, for example, things like the quite high parking charges for our country parks, which yes, it's fine. Somebody who's not on a particularly high amount of money from month to month might be able to manage to go to a country park once a month or once every other month. But if it was free, they might be able to take their kids there every evening after school, and obviously the mental and physical benefits from that would be fantastic. So we wanted to look at reducing those kinds of barriers to improve health and well-being in the area. Finally, I think the other big thing was really, again, building on the amount building on our relationships with the voluntary sector, and really making sure that, one, we're not all doing the same work, so we're not sort of repeating each other's work across the area, but also where a voluntary organisation is the best organisation to deliver a service in a particular area with a particular local knowledge, we should be utilising that as much as we can. And I think that was, sorry, it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and I know that a lot of what I've said is not news to you at all, but I hope that our look at it has added to your own assurance that we felt that the blueprint really does look like it's, up to scratch, and we're excited to work with you and help you to get this right. And I see that Steve has a question for me, so I'll leave it over to you now.
Just before I bring Steve, thank you for that, Helen. That was really refreshing and very useful indeed. Martin, did you want to say anything at this stage to support this, or wait until the questions start to come through?
No, I don't think I can add anything to what Councillor Harrison said, but happy to answer questions if that's...
Stephen's got a question then. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Not necessarily a question. Councillor Harrison will be very pleased on that front, I'm sure, but just some passing comments, if that's all right. Firstly, in relation to the housing standards and the disabled facilities grants, that's absolutely right, and how much you looked into that in detail. Of course, because as you say, it's just an overbrief today, but I certainly know a number of the problems we've had as district and borough councils in the past has been the number of occupational therapists and how long it takes to do the referrals, and also with the amounts of contractors available to actually do the work. So from my point of view, it's not criticism of the past here, but it's in relation to addressing referrals. From my point of view, it's not in relation to, and I'm not saying it's suggesting that, but it's not in relation to councils actually, in my view, not getting on with the work, but it's actually in relation to the delays in general terms, that there weren't enough OTs around to actually do the assessments in the first place. And when that was done, obviously finding the right contractors in relation to obviously agreed contractors to actually carrying out the work. So from my understanding, that's where quite a bit of the review is. I appreciate it's not a criticism, but I think going forward, from my point of view, they're one of the the key areas to address, actually having more OTs around and actually having a list of qualified contractors to actually be able to do the work, to stop obviously the hold up in relation to all that. The other thing I just want to mention, Chair, of course, is that obviously waste is in my portfolio, and obviously vice chair of the waste partnership in the county, and I certainly welcome all the comments here. We do need to address item 1, which is in relation to capacity around the MRF, and I appreciate, or that's what you obviously mean by the infrastructure and obviously disposing of recycle it. From my point of view, I note it does say in others, rather than just working with West Northamptonshire. I will say, as being involved in probably the last probably 15 years in trying to address the issue around working as a county to address this problem, I think, as I just mentioned, Chair, 15 years later, we haven't got anywhere, and it's not necessarily about county and districts, or about planning permissions for the recycling plant. I think there's 2 permissions already in Corby to address this issue. I think a lot of it is about capacity and who we work with. And from my point of view, it is about time we put this one to bed. It has been going on for far too long. And if we haven't got the capacity in Northamptonshire generally, not just in the north, but in the west as well, then in my view, we do have to make a decision whether we work on our own with commercial interests and actually make money, not make money, but actually make use of recycling going forward, or actually, cut to the chase, and we can either work with the Peterborough and the West can go with Milton Keynes, or the options. But we do actually, as suggested, actually need to crack this one once and for all in going forward. And I think this is probably the ideal time. And I would mention green waste, because it is obviously absolutely right that we need to address the green waste issue in North Northamptonshire. Obviously, we can't have the scenario where we have different systems across North Northamptonshire, so that does need addressing. So, and I think in general, Chair, I agree with the 6 points that have been raised there. But the first point, the infrastructure, that is long overdue, and hopefully we can crack that one once and for all as an authority or as an area. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen, for that. I've got Ian Jelly. Ian?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And I'd like to say thanks to Helen and your team, or your colleagues on this, for putting together a very comprehensive report and very detailed. So for that, just a couple of points. When we talk about waste, 5.4.3 of the report, about the increase in recyclates that were collected. I know in Kettering and Corby, sitting on the joint streets, Corby, at the peak, it was over 30% increase, because people were at home and there's far more waste going into the blue bins that we have. So actually started to drop down now, but there is still quite an increase in extra recyclates going through. I agree with we need to deal with this now and like the right way forward. We work with another authority, and I think whatever we decide to, it's got to be right for us. Hamptonshire, it'll be beneficial. And I think the other thing you mentioned was communication. Communication vital. There's a lot of people get pressure about recycle and when the bins go out, and what day have we got to do the black bin, and so on and so forth. So communication is key. I think we need to do that. I take on board your point about parking charges at country parks. That's quite that's a significant point. I think that a barrier out there and enjoying themselves and getting fresh air and exercise and so on. I think that's something we should certainly do that. On the point, I think it was point 7 on public health, that the voluntary sector should be supported to take up a significant role in public health promotion and service delivery. If you remember last week, we said that we were going to put another £600,000 in over 3 years to support the voluntary sector. The voluntary sector are vital to helping us deliver a lot of services. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, for every you put into the voluntary sector, you get about £10 worth of work back out of them. And that is a great asset to local councils. Yeah, I feel we should support them. But, thank you very much for the report. It's been really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason Smithers.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you so much for bringing this to us today. The blueprint from the Task and Finish group is very informative, and some useful stuff in there that you've put. And I'm sure, given more time, you could have put a heck of a lot more in there as well, but time is of the essence. So talking about housing standards, energy efficiency and design, that's something that we really need to get a grip of in the early days of this authority as we begin to move forward with housing and waste infrastructure and capacity, which Councillor North has sort of touched on previously. We know there's a capacity issue in the county currently at the moment, and that's something that we're going to need to sort out early doors within this authority to better understand and how we can manage that. And the conversations need to start pretty soon on that. I like the interdependencies on the public health and how that all clicks in, and it just shows what can be done, what can be achieved with small investments, can give some big outcomes. And as Councillor Jenny had just had said about public health and the country parks as well, we can look at something like that. That would be an absolute fantastic idea. So really, just thank you for that. It's been quite informative, and thanks for the good work.
Thanks, Jason. I've got Wendy now. Wendy Brackenbury.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Helen, and the Task and Finish group. Helen's absolutely right that the move to a new Northants Council gives greater opportunity for departments to work closer together for the benefits of our residents. And housing is an excellent example of that, working closely with children's and adult social care. So, it's a great opportunity as we move towards the new Northants Council for those departments to work together, and all for the benefit of our residents. So thank you.
Thanks for that. David, Jenny. David.
Thank you, yeah, I just want to pick up on one particular area which is closer to my heart, because everybody else has covered the general stuff. The comment about standards in housing, this splits into two areas, one of which is national policy, which is the building regulations, which unfortunately we can't do too much about. But we have got a brilliant joint planning unit, which is working very closely with government, enhancing standards. And one of the real triumphs for us was actually forcing through the Joint Planning Committee our core spatial strategy, which enhanced standards for space prior to the government catching up with the building regs. So we have what I would like to consider a very proud record of enhancing standards, and I'm looking forward to making sure that we take that forward.
Thank you, David. I've got Martin Griffiths.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'm really pleased that the blueprint was received in such a positive way with this report, as many hours were spent pre and post lockdown, coming up with the report that Councillor Harrison referred to as a very comprehensive document. And with 28 days to go before vesting day on the 1st of April, I think it's important that we get over the line and we deliver, and we continue to progress those items that Councillor Harrison has mentioned, and many more that we have already progressed as part of the Shadow Authority. So thanks ever so much for that piece of work. Thanks.
Thank you. Has anybody else got anything they want? I found it interesting. You said a lot of important things, Helen, but when you talked about the culture changing, I think you put your finger right on it. We do need to change the culture. We need to get people like people from the health, as well as all the other departments, to come together. Housing's about health. We've known that for a very long time, but thank you very much for that. I'm going to move to, nobody wants to say anything else, so I'm going to move to a mover. Have a mover. Move it, Jason, Councillor Smithers, and a seconder. I've got Ian Jelly, so we've got a mover and a seconder. Could I have a show of hands for all those four noting this report? Just keep your hands up for a bit while Ben does his bit.
It's unanimous, Chair.
It's unanimous. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night. Thanks for coming. Right, we now come to item 6, Kettering Leisure Services Contract. And I now believe that Martin Hammond, Executive Director of KBC, is going to introduce this report. Martin, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. As this report sets out, the existing Kettering Borough Leisure contract ends in March 2022 and can't be extended because it's been extended once. So the proposal is that a relatively short contract is put out to tender that contract to run until 2028, which means that this new contract will expire at the same time as the existing contracts for facilities in East Northampton and Wallingborough. That gives the new council the opportunity to take a North Northampton-wide approach to how it wants to manage leisure facilities in the future, and gives a decent amount of time to plan for that, so that you've had the opportunity to consider everything that needs to be considered. The contract that we're intending to put out isn't a significant change to the existing one, as it's currently designed, but it will seek interest from tenderers as to their willingness to put some investment into the all-weather pitch that currently needs renewing on Lake Avenue. And the aim is to bring the conclusions of the exercise back to members in November for a decision about who to award the contract to.
Thank you, Martin. Has anybody got any questions they want to ask? This seems very straightforward.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, you know where the recommendation is on.
Yeah, we've got Councillor Stephen North would like to
Oh, I
speak.
do beg your pardon, Steve.
No, it's quite all right. At the time you check to see whether you are muted or not. Sometimes people have moved on.
I did look up and you hadn't got your hand up.
You really can't win, really, to be honest. They should just put hand up for the sake of it. So it's only a minor quizzy. I appreciate we're in a brand new world with a unitary authority chair, and things are obviously different from district and boroughs in relation to member involvement. But we have said about obviously greatest member involvement where possible. I obviously got the timetable in relation to the procurement, and this is only a small point under 5.4 in relation to the procurement. I just wondered, Chair, and as I said, I appreciate this is a unitary authority, not a district or borough council, and there's probably less need or requirement for member involvement, but I certainly aware that there's obviously been quite a lot of member involvement at the ITT evaluation stages in relation to procurement, and I just wondered what the view is in relation to involving members in relation to those evaluations, this and others, and actually making recommendations to the executive, fully appreciating of what I've just said about we are obviously in a completely different place being a unitary than a borough or district, but we've also said we would have member involvement going forward rather than just having reports to the executive. So I just wonder what the view is on that front.
Has anybody? I mean, for my part, member involvement is crucial, but we are in a funny phase of the thing, and we're tidying things up. That's why we're doing it the way we're doing it. But I don't think I've ever known any pushback on getting member involvement. I don't know what you think about this, Martin, from your point of view.
I think I'm going to pass on that question. I don't think it's for me to comment.
Well, there you are. You'll have to put up with. Was that sufficient for you, Stephen? Or?
No, I don't think anybody answered the question at all, Chair, to be honest.
Sorry, Rob. So thank you, Leader. Councillor North, I think we obviously will engage with members on appropriate procurement process that we do. What we haven't yet developed is how we're going to do that through the whole of the unitary, because obviously different procurement levels will need to be considered in the type of procurement that we're taking through. This is obviously of a reasonable value and something that we will certainly engage with the relevant portfolio holder and work out as we go through the process how best to engage wider members as we get to a point of the executive formally making approving a recommendation.
Thank you for that, because it was a more generalised comment, but how are we going to involve members with general procurement? So I appreciate the value and where we're at, but it was a more generalised point. So thank you.
1,000 apologies, Rob. Old habits die hard. I've got Martin. Did you want to speak, or has your?
It's been answered, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Jenny. David.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, just following on from what Stephen said, I think we need a wider discussion than just procurement. We haven't talked about working parties and how quite a few of the major things that we do are actually handled at the moment. One thing, for instance, that sort of would strike me would be the Rushton SUE. We have quite a significant board to oversee that, and I'm sure that there are certain things that in the future we will certainly need to look at. But I appreciate, and before I get into trouble with the chief executive, we probably haven't had time to get that far yet. But I do think we do need a discussion about that at some stage in the not too distant future. Thank you.
I stand by my words about making sure that people are involved.
Yeah.
And now, Martin, are you back again? Yeah, right, off you go, Martin.
Thanks, Chairman. I have got one question that I'm sure Martin might be able to answer, and that's about the 3G pitch. And obviously we in Wellingborough fairly recently, seems constructed a 3G pitch. Can I just ask if this one it will be of rubber base, or will it be of one of the more the coconut type formation that is more acceptable to a large proportion of our residents, Chairman?
Martin?
Thank you.
Rubber or coconut?
Well, I think there's lots of different bases, but there is the one that does cause a bit of concern, and that's the rubber tyre based ones. But I just thought I'd ask the question.
Yeah. You're testing my technical knowledge now, Councillor Griffiths, but I think we might be heading for the coconut rather than the rubber. But that's something we can flush out in the tender documents.
That's pretty good. That's good news.
Yeah.
And I've got Ian Jelly. Ian?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to add in there that the all-weather pitch with Lamar has been really overused over many years. The Kettering Hockey Club have been using it for a long time, and also the five-side football and stuff like this. So it's really been hammered over the last, God knows how many, 8 or 10 years. So I think, whatever we do, it has to be a substantial replacement to make sure it's fit for all of those purposes. We've got a situation at the moment where we've got well over 400 football teams in and around Kettering. And with the bad weather we've had over the winter, they're crying out for a 3G pitch to play on. So I think, we need to make sure it's substantial pitch going forward, and it's fit for purpose. So,
thank you. David Jenny. David?
Thank you. Just to fill in the detail for Martin.
Cool. It's cool.
4G is rubber crumb and is suitable for football only, and you have to rake it to level it off. 3G is suitable for hockey and sometimes tennis and stuff like that as well. So it really depends upon what the intended usage is as to which whether it's 3G or 4G to go for.
Yeah, and the popular one is cork based, actually, not coconut. I must be thinking of holidays in the sun or something like that.
Okay.
Got the wrong background up tonight then.
Has anybody else got any pearls of wisdom or questions they'd like to? In that case, could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Delighted to move, Chair.
Thank you for Martin's moving. Ian Jelly is seconding. Could I have a show of hands for those people who are for?
That's unanimous, Chair. Chair, you seem to have muted.
What happened there?
You're back on now.
I'll start that all again because I'm sure nobody heard anything I was saying. Apologies for that. Technical gremlins. Right, I can confirm that there is one exempt item for consideration at this meeting. I therefore propose to exclude the public and press from the meeting during consideration of the following item of business: asset capital scheme notification process, land off Rothwell Road, South Desborough, in accordance with section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, because exempt information may be disclosed. Please may I have a mover and a seconder? Move that be done. Jason Smithers is moving and Wendy Brackenby is seconding. Can I have a show of hands, please?
That's unanimous.